Hello and welcome to the Listening Post's unboxing channel on YouTube. Today it's with great pride I'm unboxing Thorens TD 1500. They're stunning mid to high end turntable. Thorens have been manufacturing turntables for decades, in and out of course of all sorts of price points and quality points. Well, this is an iconic piece, and I mean that, truly superb. Sound quality, build quality is absolutely second to none in its price, and it's wonderful that we get the opportunity to share it with you today. Now, Thorens' packaging, to be honest, it's always been a bit like this sort of red-brown printing, that's about it. Thorens logo, model number. It's got that same thing emulated in a sticker off to one side with scannable information associated with the serial number and model number for warehousing purposes. Okay, big Thorens logo on one end and an emulation of the same serial number information on the other. Opening this is really straightforward because of course it's just sealed closed with your traditional packing tape. A few nicks and away we go. Now the good news is once you break open the boring brown box, you see a wonderful full colour internal box, allowing you to use the outer as perhaps a freight carton if required. Getting that off's pretty easy, and we get rid of it. Right, now because we can, there's the bottom, and there's again the full colour logo. Now this is where it all starts to get a little bit more intriguing. We now see a bright red Thorens logo along with the web address, another emulation associated with the model and serial number information and scannable code, and a close-up. You see, this turntable comes pre-fitted with a stunning Autofon 2M red cartridge, which is a wonderful little addition. It's been set up nicely as well as far as its positioning on the head shell. Now opening this again is very easy. The unit itself, again, it's just clear packing tape. And we see the top protected with layers of cardboard. Now carefully lifting that out, we see firstly a set-up card associated with the alignment of the cartridge. Now this is really straightforward. You basically stick it on the centre pin and you've got positioning across the arc of the cartridge, tracking across with the arm of course across the record. Then the next we've got is the Thorens sort of rubber mat. Now it's actually really heavy and that's part of its job. You see, it's all about reducing resonance. It's all about ensuring that the only thing vibrating in a turntable is the stylus. And so even things like the mat is really important to the performance because it helps to isolate the record from any microscopic vibrations left in the platter and any resonant vibrations associated with the stylus, and I'm talking minute here of course, but any of that resonant vibration associated with that stylus tracking through the record and potentially affecting the platter. So you will find that this isn't just some boring rubber mat. In fact, it is embossed with the Thorens logo, smooth on one side and a couple of grooves on the other, and I would suspect that that's part of its operation and why it does sound so good. The next layer lifts out along with some closed cell foam, and that's the obviously the perspex lid. It's protected in freight with a closed cell foam bag, lovely to see. Now the lid is slightly tinted with a black grey sort of perspex and is preformed for the hinges that we're going to see in a moment's time. There's also a couple of little rubber grommets to ensure that as the lid closes it doesn't bang or scratch the surface of the record player. Okay, so the next thing to look at is some of the accessories, and these can be removed easily by just nicking the tape that's holding them in place. There's a bubble wrap bag, and in it is a wide range of all of the accessories. You've got that 45 adapter for the records with the larger hole. you've got two brackets, and that's associated, hinge brackets associated with obviously the lid and mounting it to the turntable. Now for those that are in a tight cabinet environment or something like that, the lid becomes a little bit optional. You could choose to not use the lid and just slide the record in from a slot perspective if required. So the hinges each are in their own separate bags and each closed with a little bit of sellotape. Then we see an external power supply. This is a DC power supply, and it comes with a little bit of information about how to click the appropriate New Zealand power plug into it. Of course, then it has a bag with all of the accessories associated with that power supply. So we've got all the overseas voltages. I'm just going to drill in, chuck those away and put off to one side the one associated with New Zealand. And it's pretty straightforward as far as making that work. Click it in, the curved side, and then you see it, you heard that, a nice comprehensive click knowing it's in place. Now unlike the model up, the 1600, this 1500 has a DC power supply. The 1600 has a very elaborate connection back to an external power supply box and lifts or lowers the noise floor and lifts the performance of the record player as well. But this is hitting a very aggressive price point for its build, and so we forgive for the fact that it's using an external DC power supply. Now the last accessory in that little bag, of course, is the belt. Again, the specifics associated with the belt and its ability to absorb any of the microscopic vibrations associated with the motor and its workings means that the belt itself is integral to the performance as well. Replacement belts are readily available, and it's important, I guess, that you look after these types of things. Now the second sort of thing strapped in place with sellotape is the comprehensive multi-language manual and the head shell from the cartridge. Opening these, again everything's sellotaped closed. So there's the manual. It's very comprehensive, again, associated with all of the elements of its operation and setup. And look, as always, hang around for some of our close-up photographs. What we'll do towards the end is show some of the basic setups so that you can see how these things sort of get connected and are best utilised. Now it's interesting, although I did say it was a 2M red, it appears that this is the much better 2M bronze cartridge, and that significant investment, of course, is part of the investment in the mechanical process associated with the pickup. And it's unusual to see such a high quality cartridge and stylus combination on such a relatively affordable turntable, so that's wonderful to see. There's a small plastic bag off to one side, and that's got one of the pins associated with the arm. I'll put that off to one side. And then lastly, last but not least, accessory taped in place across the top, and again it's in its own bubble bag. Is the tonearm's counterweight associated with obviously setting all of the tracking forces, and it's very clearly labelled, and there's a couple of screws on the back. Okay. Actually lifting up just so we can see. Now lifting the turntable out, firstly, this is not a lightweight turntable. It's not a big monster either, but it's certainly not light. And it's important you're careful lifting it out. There's a couple of bits of clothes, cell foam to protect it, as you would expect. We'll get rid of those. Right. And in the bottom we've got the platter and other things which we'll drill into. I'm going to put that off to one side. Right. So we've got a bit of cardboard just to help separate things in freight, and a whole bunch of closed cell foam supporting the heavyweight platter that's at the bottom. Now getting the platter out of the box is really easy. Again, a simple enough slice open of the tape. Okay. And we've got the aluminium platter. Now this is beautifully machined, and again, part of the reason this performs so well. You can sort of see from the underside what I mean. You've got the internal ring associated with the belt and its operation with the motor, and a beautifully engineered centre point, ensuring that this is balanced and utterly perfect. It's two-tone, so we see a polished edge, almost like a chrome finish, and then the matte black paint. Focusing again back on the turntable, it's in an oversized plastic bag. Slipping that off is pretty straightforward. Obviously taking care not to snag the arm along the way. Removing that, we then see another very soft polished cloth bag to keep the turntable in mint condition in transit. There's not one fingerprint or mark on this unit, and it's wonderful to see the care and attention that Thorens have made with this in its packaging to ensure that it comes to you in utterly perfect condition. Now, pausing for a moment and having a look, you can see this sort of mess of stuff. Now, that's quite obvious to ensure that no one tries to fit the platter before they've removed the transit screws. This is a transcriptor design, meaning that the arm and platter float on springs, and those springs and all of this must be locked in place for transit. Otherwise you can imagine the interruption and wobbling associated with even the most basic courier delivery, let alone international freight. So they make it really obvious that those elements have to be removed. The process is very straightforward. There's 3 easy to twist off screws. One, 2, 3, and there's a really long sort of twist tie linking them all together. Obviously, again, visually reminding people to remove them, but also keeping them nice and tidy in one place. Now, as soon as they are released, you end up with this able to move freely. And by the way, an important little note. Even if you're moving the turntable carefully within your home, you should take the platter off. What it does is, I mean, that's a really heavy platter. It stops the entire thing wobbling around and making a potential stress or strain over the transcriptor suspension. And that's kind of one of those things. Minimum, jam something underneath, but probably tuck the platter under your arm and carefully carry it to the next room rather than letting it wobble around. Okay, so the basic assembly is very straightforward. The first is to fit the belt to the inner ring of the platter. Just put it in place. Now, my recommendation is before you put the platter on, you actually grab the rubber band with your fingers. Now, the reason I recommend that is just to make the next step a little bit easier, which is where you fit the platter to the spindle and then easily navigate it around to the motor. Now, of course, you can drag it off later if you need to, but the idea is, by doing it initially as part of the first setup, is that you're not having to fish around with the small hole near the motor or potentially sort of disturb things unnecessarily. We see then, I'm just going to do a basic setup. We put the mat on so that we can start to see what it looks like, and then the head shell into its clips. Okay? So now it's starting to look very much like a turntable, and with the counterweight, that's pretty much how you'll see it in your home. And you'll see again, it slowly sort of subtly wobbles around a little bit as the suspension starts to take over. So, now let's have a look at it. Firstly, we see the beautiful wood grain finish. This is available in 2 colorways, a gloss black and then this gloss wood grain. It's a walnut finish, I think, or it could be mahogany. Nevertheless, it's a lovely little touch to show that there is an iconic sort of colorway available. We see a basic switch associated with 33 and 45 and an off position of 0 in the middle between those two. Again, we see Thorens logos on the head shell and on the plinth's surface. We see as we spin it around the ability to adjust anti-skate and raise and lower the arm. The arm itself is clipped in place for transit, and there's even a beautiful little piece of protective plastic around the arm to ensure that any vibration in transit isn't going to end up with a mark on the aluminium arm. The arm itself is the TP150, which is iconic and renowned as far as the engineering associated with its bearings and operation and floating elements of it. Turning it around slowly, we see some of the important elements that make this such a high-end piece of kit. We see, basically, look, we've got the power on and off at the back and the 12-volt DC input associated with the DC power supply. But then we see something quite unique in its price. And that's the fully balanced outputs associated with the very best way of connecting this to a high-end phono preamp or a high-end integrated amplifier that has a preamp on board. The RCA outputs have a beautiful fit and finish as well, and even the ground connection has an excellent fit and finish as far as the quality of that, which is brilliant to see. We see the basic plastic hinge mounts, and again hang around for some close-ups where we'll take a few photographs of the hinges and the lid and do a final assembly. It's worth mentioning, as my hand sort of grips one of these feet, that they have the ability to level the turntable and have a lovely foam pad to ensure that the surface vibration is virtually eliminated as well. So there we have it. Thorens stunning TD 1500 turntable, unboxed here at the Listening Post in Christchurch, New Zealand. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more, subscribe to our channel.